Greetings sailors and welcome to a preview of the Stalingrad, which is going to be the upcoming tier 10 reward ship of some kind. I'm not entirely clear if it's going to be exclusively related to clan wars or ranked, or if you're going to get it for steel. The details have not been made known to us, at least to my knowledge. It might be that they have been made known to us and that it's been buried in a post that I've missed, or it's been in a dev blog that I haven't read, because I don't quite manage to read absolutely everything. So it's possible it's been announced, and how you get this, and I just don't know. But anyway, it's a tier 10. It's not a premium, it's a reward ship of some stripe, and as you are probably aware, it's been in the works for a little while. Now what you're seeing is kind of the most recent version. It's the most recent version that any of us community contributors have had to play with. But they have announced since then that there are going to be a couple more small changes. One of which is it's going to get defensive AA available, because at the moment it's hideously vulnerable to carrier drops, especially tier 10 carrier drops. It's long. The torpedo belt protection, if I remember correctly, isn't that good. And, well, actually, no, 25%. I actually just looked that up. 25% is not hideous, but still, yeah, when you're talking tier 10 carrier drops, it's not going to save you. Anyway, yeah, it's long, it's not maneuverable, and the turning radius is hideous. And without a defensive to scatter a drop being made on you, there's not a lot you can do about it. Not this round of testing, but the previous round, or one of the previous rounds, where we had two versions of the ship to play. I don't know if anyone remembers that we at one point were testing an AP only version of the ship, but I had a couple of experiences with that version where, yeah, I was just dropped by carriers, and there was literally nothing I could do about it because there didn't happen to be an AA cruiser with a defensive available nearby. And so that's kind of welcome, but at the same time it's also removing one of the particularly weak points of the ship. Now overall, it's actually quite difficult for me to render an informed opinion on this. I can tell you that with this version I was mostly getting games over 100k damage. The average for the games that I played will definitely have been over 100k. There was, I think, like 2 that were under. One was dramatically under, and the other was like 90k damage, and then the rest were all easily 100k plus. This one, this is going to be nearly 200k damage. And I'm telling you these numbers because when it comes to tier 10, when it comes to high tier cruisers, I'm a scrub. This is one of the reasons why it's difficult for me to talk about this ship in an informed way. I don't have any regular tier 10 cruisers. I only have a couple of tier 9 cruisers, although one of them is the Dmitry Donskoy. So it's hard for me to directly compare it to any of the tier 10s. From what I've been told, the Zhao and maybe the Henri are perhaps not dissimilar in terms of what you want to do with them to get the optimal playstyle, but I don't really know. I mean, the Kronstadt, you know, that's another point of potential comparison, but I don't have that, so I can't directly compare it there either. So there's that, and there's also the fact that tier 10 is not my favourite tier. I honestly find tier 10 games to be not boring exactly, but they can be tedious more often than not. I'm one of those warships players that likes to get stuck in, basically, and not be doing all of this over and over, just slow, patient, whittling away. And of course at tier 10 everyone's got so many hit points, and the engagement ranges can be so long, and when you're playing a ship that has this poor maneuverability, you really do have to use that long range that you have. But then of course, you know, at the same time, it can all go very, very wrong very, very quickly, especially when you're in a cruiser. This at least, though, although if you're giving broadside, you can die exceptionally fast. If you're angling, the armour is at least quite decent. The fore and aft are 25mm, but there's a 50mm belt as well, and the main belt is, I can't even remember offhand, but it's pretty respectable. You can tank damage like a battleship. You've got hit points like a battleship. So in some ways this is like playing a battleship that has very, very good accuracy and a very, very good reload. They're not big guns though. I think they're 305mm, but they're big enough and the accuracy is good enough that it's like, as I say, it's like playing a battleship with some of the deficiencies of battleships just taken out of the equation. And I think this is one of the difficulties that Wargaming's had with balancing the Stalingrad overall. This is why we've had so many rounds of this thing being tested, that they haven't just pushed it out, because they're acutely aware that if they put it out and it's way too overpowered, then it makes certain other ships obsolete. But as it stands, I don't know. I don't really know if it's too strong at the moment. It certainly does feel like a strong ship. And as I said, I was easily doing over 100k damage in most of my games. But then there's always that thing at tier 10 where is the damage that you're doing necessarily useful damage? Because you can end up just farming oodles of damage against very few targets, which is actually what's going to happen in this particular game. There's going to be, I think, less than half, it's like 4 or 5 enemy ships that I actually landed any damage on. And there's going to be one in particular that I get a whole bunch of damage out of, but didn't actually kill. And it's just, again, the nature of tier 10, especially tier 10 battleships. You can farm them for a lot, but unless you can focus them down or deliver a decisive blow when they're out of position, they can come back from it. And that's one of the reasons why actually my most played tier 10 anything battleships, pretty much, because you have that survivability. So at the moment, I mean, it feels like a very, very capable damage dealer in certain circumstances, and the reason I picked out this replay, it wasn't just the damage, but it was the fact that I was doing this. I was just in a position to kite away from a whole bunch of enemy ships and stay angled, and to my scrub experience of tier 10, this feels like the optimal way to play this ship, basically, to just keep at medium to long ranges and farm damage, you know, set fires where you can, use the AP where you can, because the AP is very, very good on this ship, especially against other cruisers, but even against other battleships at long ranges, because they're Soviet shells, they're fast. Fast and accurate is a very, very potent combination. But despite that, despite this being sort of optimal, you know, in this particular game, I don't know if I necessarily had that big of an impact overall. I mean, the score screen's going to be good, and the damage is going to be good, and it even could be better, as you will, as you know, as I'll point out when we get to that part. But I kind of walked away from this ship feeling overall like I was doing well in terms of farming a lot of damage, but not necessarily making a decisive difference in any of the games that I was actually playing. But that might just be me, you know? I can't tell if that's me or if that's the ship. There's a very good chance that it is me, that I'm positioning myself in the wrong place and farming the wrong targets. So absolutely, you know, take this entire video with that in mind. This is not intended to be a definitive, oh yeah, this is too overpowered, or this is too weak and it needs buffs. Although it would be unlikely I'd be giving that video. But yeah, it definitely feels strong in my scrub hands. I'll put it that way. But the other thing to consider, of course, that I haven't mentioned up until now, is that it's tier 10, and therefore you'll be able to use it in clan wars. And how it will perform in clan wars versus how it will perform in random battles, that's a whole separate question. And in some ways, maybe we just won't really know until the point where it gets tested out in a season of clan wars. But it does have at least the potential to be disruptive. You could basically take this as a second almost battleship. Because at the moment in Clan Wars, in Tier 10, you get one battleship per team. You take this and you've got a battleship's worth of hit points. And it's going to take a concerted effort by an enemy team to bring it down. And you will be able to bring it down. You know, let's say you get a team facing a Stalingrad that has a whole bunch of Hindenburgs. But let's say, you know, it's like a couple of Stalingrads versus a couple of Hindenburgs. It's going to take the Hindis time to focus down one Stalingrad, and if you've got multiple Stalingrads on a team, and it's probably not going to happen very often, but as time progresses, as more people get a hold of the Stalingrad, it might become more of an issue. So, again, I don't really know. It's a bit of a question mark. I have a feeling like it might actually be more of a problem in its current state for Clan Wars than it will be for random games. Although for random games, I've no doubt that a more competent player than I could absolutely kick ass in this thing. But I mean, it does have vulnerabilities. It is incredibly awkward to use and to get into a good position with. Because apart from anything else, and I've mentioned the maneuverability, but you put on top of that the fact that it has an absolutely hideous surface concealment, and as a cruiser, it gets a bit less benefit from concealment expert than a battleship does. In some cases, there are going to be battleships that will outspot you. So, it's not without its weaknesses, it's not without its awkwardnesses. And if you get, in a random game, if you get a team that just totally leaves you out to swing in terms of positioning, or if you get caught unawares and forced into a spot of bad manoeuvring where you have to give broadside to somebody that you really don't want to, it could go south very, very quickly. Other cruisers at this tier, for the most part, have the option of stealthing up and slipping away, but that's going to be a lot harder to do in the Stalingrad. So we're getting towards the end of this one. This Yamato in particular, this is going to be the target that I farm a lot of damage from, but don't actually manage to kill. But so far I've managed over 150k. This has already been a decent game for me, but I haven't actually killed anything. As one of the things that, as I was playing it, and again this was probably me rather than the ship, but I felt like I was doing well in terms of damage, but maybe not doing that well in terms of actually killing things. We're kind of winning this overall, though. There were enough ships that pushed through sea and were pulled away from the main fight, and that I was able to farm damage from, that we've gotten ourselves a pretty comfortable lead. Although there's not a huge gap in terms of the actual numbers of ships, but enough to be comfortable. And crucially, they have lost their destroyers at this stage as well, with the death of that Shima that I helped spot with my radar. Because, you know, that's another thing that maybe bears mentioning that I haven't, that you probably have noticed already. But yeah, it has radar on top of everything else as well, and it's Soviet long range but short duration radar. And that would actually almost be interesting if it didn't come with radar. But I don't think Wargaming's ever considered that as an option. So, having said everything that I've said, it feels pretty strong at the moment. Just based on the relatively small number of games that I did play with it. The fact that I, as a scrub, could get such consistently decent damage out of it, and I know I'm not the only one that was testing this thing that voiced that opinion as well. Not necessarily the I'm a scrub part, but the consistency of the damage. Yeah, if there was really anything you were going to do to it at this stage, I think it would either be reduced accuracy or reduced reload. And if it was up to me, I would probably reduce the reload a little bit. I would probably put it from 20 seconds to say, well, I say reduce, lengthen the reload. You know what I mean, right? I hope so. Anyway, I'd probably put it up to about 22 seconds. See how it does there. Because it really does feel like an incredibly consistent damage dealer. And although it's got its awkwardnesses, and although you could have a team that just leaves you so badly out of position. If you have a team that's decent, if you're playing with a platoon, or hell, even in clan wars where everything is much more organised, that's not going to be an issue. And in that case, you are really quite horribly effective. And I really don't know what was going through the minds of the people that I was playing against when they were fighting me in this thing, but it was probably a somewhat frustrating experience because it's a hard ship to put down. If you give broadside, then it becomes very, very easy, but if you're angling correctly, yeah, it becomes a really annoying ship to deal with. And the only time I actually faced an enemy one of these while I was testing it in this version, it was somebody who gave a lot of broadside and got punished really, really hard, and I think I barely had a chance to get a shot at them. I do suspect, however, having said all of that, Wargaming will be keeping a sharp eye on this one. Even if it comes out in a state that's just a bit too good, they'll be hyper aware, maybe more so than normal when they put a new ship out, that they'll be, you know, watching how it performs and seeing if it needs any tweaks or nerfs. This is the part, by the way, we're just about to win this on points. If I'd had AP loaded, I thought this guy was going to come round the island, the side that I went round the island on, the southern side, and instead he went round the north side, and if I'd had AP loaded, that could have been easily over 200k, because that could have been some glorious Citadel shots right there. So a little less caution at the end there, and that could have been one of my best damage games on the EU server overall, but as it was still pretty good. It just wasn't quite that spectacular. So there we go, top of the team, as I said, but was I that decisive? Did I help the team that much? I mean, I did draw some of the enemy ships away, which certainly helps in a domination game, but I don't know, I just felt weirdly like I was farming rather than actually actively contributing, because the ship I got the most damage out of, that Yamato, they were still very much alive and quite healthy at the end of that. So I don't really think I've got much more to add at this stage. I will be curious to see how this performs when it comes out, although of course only Wargaming will know for sure. But the proof will be in the pudding, as they say. If it gets significant nerfs or changes post-release, then we'll know that yes, it absolutely was overperforming. But my gut feeling is that if it's OP at the moment, it's not that OP. That it's not completely broken. That it's only kind of mildly broken, if that. So anyway, that is a work in progress look at the Stalingrad, which, as I've said, is coming out with patch 078. Hopefully you found there to be at least some useful information in this one, although Lord knows it wasn't my most decisive preview video. But nonetheless, if you did, you can leave any comments below, you can hit the like button, sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.